Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our Hanafi fiqh class. We are doing the kitab known as I'ala Sunan of Maulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi rahimahullah. And tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we are entering a new chapter. We had passed by the chapters with regards to tahara, like wudu and ghusl and things of that sort, tayammum and everything, and wiping over the khuffain and everything. Tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we are coming now to a new group of chapters, or at least a chapter with many sub-chapters. So let us begin. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we are in volume 1 under Kitab al-Tahara on page 351. The chapter tonight is Al-Haydh wal-Nifas wal-Istihadatu. This is the broad heading. The chapter of Haydh, the chapter of Nifas, and the chapter of Istihada. At least the chapter dealing with these three things. So it's a very feminine chapter, so to speak. So Haydh, as you know, is a woman's natural, normal menstrual period. Nifas is the bleeding which takes place after childbirth, and istihada is an irregular bleeding which exceeds, or at least it's the blood which is seen beyond the days of Hayd and beyond the days of Nifas, bleeding which is found. So okay, we'll come to maximum and minimums and stuff. I'm not going to jump the gun right now, but anyway, excess blood is known as istihada. So tonight's chapter is Babu Aqallil Haydhi wa Aktharihi. The chapter with regard wa Aktharuhu. The chapter with regards to the minimum amount of hayd and the maximum, meaning what is the shortest space of time that is deemed as minimum hayd and how long is the maximum that hayd can last from a Hanafi perspective. Obviously, other madhahib have got different viewpoints, so we are dealing here now with the Hanafi madhab. So we're doing hadith number 326 عن عثمان ابن أبي العاص رضي الله تعالى عنه أنه قال الحائض إذا جاوزت 10 أيام فهي بمنزلة المستحاضة تغتسل وتصلي. رواه الدارقطني. قال البيهقي بعد نقله هذا الأثر لا بأس بإسناده كذا في الجوهر النقي. So Hadrat Uthman ibn Abi al-As radiyallahu anhu, he said, أنه قال, the meaning that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had said that al-haid, the woman in a state of menstruation, إذا جاوزت 10 أيام, if she bleeds for more than 10 days, if she bleeds for 10 days, in other words. Okay, question. One thing I'll mention, there's no need to raise hands. So if anybody at any point in time you have any questions, you're welcome to ask your questions. You can just type it and send it in. Just so you are aware, because I don't know what, I don't exactly deal with the raising of the hands as such, because I don't always see such things. Nonetheless, carrying on. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam thus is saying that a woman إذا جاوزت 10 أيام, if her bleeding of hayd exceeds 10 days, جاوزت means goes beyond, 10 أيام 10 days, فهي بمنزلة المستحاضة, then she is in the state, or she's deemed as being a woman in a state of istihada. And what does she do? تغتسل وتصلي. She will make ghusl and she will perform her salah. The laws of istihada will thus apply to her. So Imam al-Daraqutni rahimahullah reports this hadith in his Sunan, and Imam al-Bayhaqi rahimahullah, after mentioning this, he says la ba'sa bi isnadihi, there's no problem with this chain of narration, meaning it's authentic. This is mentioned in Al-Jawhar al-Naqi. The actual kitab is Al-Jawhar al-Naqi fi al-Raddi ala al-Bayhaqi, written by Imam Ibn Turkumani rahimahullah. So anyway, so if you wanted to know where do we come from to say maximum hayd is 10 days, why isn't it 7 days, why isn't it 15 days, things of that sort, here we have one hadith amongst many proofs, but nonetheless one hadith is sufficient, and here you have one hadith. Moving on now to the next hadith, 327. أخبرنا محمد بن يوسف قال قال سفيان بلغني عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال أدنى الحيض 3 أيام. رواه الدارمي في سننه. So Imam Muhammad ibn Yusuf, he says that Sufyan said, you'll see who Sufyan is that's being spoken about, who mentions it has reached me from Hadrat Anas radiyallahu anhu, who said that Adna al-Haydhi ثلاثة أيام. That the shortest amount of time that Hayd is 3 days. So whether you take, for example, one Sahabi or another, the ijtihad of Sahaba or the madhahib of Sahaba and things of the sort, nonetheless, at the end of the day, yeah, we can at least establish Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu had said this. And obviously, as it goes without saying, that if Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu or other Sahaba radiallahu anhum say things of the sort, they don't just put it out of their pocket. So nonetheless, so he said that the least amount of hayd is 3 days. Obviously, other ai who differ with this will have their dalil as well, with their sahaba who have those viewpoints. And that is why we say, as is found in that narration, إنما أصحابك النجوم بأيهم اقتديتم اهتديتم. My sahaba radiallahu anhu are like the stars, whichever of them you follow, you will be guided. So whether you follow the madhab of Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu or the madhab of Hadrat Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, regardless of who you is you're following, all of them are correct. So Imam ad-Darimi, not Imam ad-Daraqutni. Imam ad-Daraqutni has got his kitab. Imam ad-Darimi, rahimahullah, is a different Imam of Hadith. He reports this Hadith. Qultu, now Mulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi comments, he says, Rijaluhu Rijalu Muslim. He says the men are the men of Muslim. The narrators, he means the narrators in the chain are the narrators found in Sahih Muslim. Was Sufyan, and I mentioned here, you will come to know who Sufyan is. Okay. Can anybody confirm if the sound is not working? Because I'm getting a message to say that the sound is nothing is coming through. So if anybody can, please confirm if there is in fact sound coming out, or am I speaking to myself over here? Testing 1 2 1 2. Okay, message to say that things are sounding fine. Okay, that's fine. Jazakumullahu khair. Right, anyhow, coming back to where we were. So he says here, the people in the chain of narration are the people found in Sahih Muslim. So what this means in simple terms, Sahih Muslim is authentic. So if the narrators found in, for example, the Sunan al-Darimi and are found in the same chain of narration as in Sahih Muslim, that means this chain of narration is so authentic that it's on the level of being in Sahih Muslim. That's what it actually means. He says, and Sufyan, who is Sufyan? And I mentioned this here. Qala Sufyan, Sufyan said. So Sufyan is Imam Sufyan al-Thawri. Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, the famous Imam from the Tabi'een. He says, وهو من كبار, or at least not Tabi'een, أتباع التابعين. He is from the senior أتباع التابعين, those who follow the Tabi'een. So one thing over here, I've heard it many times over the years, that Imam Sufyan al-Thawri was a senior to Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, and everything of the sort. In reality, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, was a junior to Imam Abu Hanifa. He was younger than Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, was in fact the senior. But anyhow, so Imam Sufyan al-Thawri is one of the major Atba'u Tabi'een. You have Tabi'een, Atba'u Tabi'een, those who follow the Tabi'een. And Atba'i Tabi'een, those who followed the followers of the Tabi'een. Any case, he says, وهو من كبار أتباع التابعين وقد أخرجوا له في الصحيح كما في التقريب. So he says, and his narrations are found in the Sahih, meaning in Bukhari, Muslim, etc. Now he said you find this in At-Taqrib. Taqrib is Taqrib al-Tahdhib of Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. It's his shortened version of Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, also by Imam Ibn Hajar, which is an abridged version of Tahdhib al-Kamal fi Asma' al-Rijal of Imam al-Mizzi, rahimahullah. So in any case, Either you can open there to page 74. Obviously, if you're in the correct print that Maulana Zafar was using at the time, then you could turn to page 74 of Taqrib al-Tahdhib, and you'll find, what will you find over there? You'll actually find uh, the one line biography. That's what Taqrib al-Tahdhib is, like a one line, not one line, but one paragraph biography of each of the narrators found in the 6 books of Hadith. So anyway, so you'll find that on page 74. وقال في طبقات المدلسين. Then in the kitab known as طبقات المدلسين, and we've discussed what a mudallis is previously. So in that kitab on page 2, it's mentioned الثانية من احتمل الأئمة تدليسه وأخرجوا له في صحيح لإمامته وقلة تدليسه في جنب ما روى كالثوري إلى آخره. So he says in طبقات المدلسين, it's mentioned the second category is those are imma who made tadlis. And okay, just to put tadlis in perspective, it is when an imam mentions a narration from someone without saying who it actually came from. So in the case here, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri did not meet Hazrat Anas radiallahu anhu. So obviously there's somebody missing between him, maybe one, even two people that reaches Hazrat Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. But he says, it has reached me from Hazrat Anas radiallahu anhu. So who's the person from? Who told Imam Sufyan al-Thawri this? Now, sometimes, as you know, with tadlis, an imam would not mention the teacher's name, not because he deemed him to be a liar or anything of the sort, or that he intends to lie, but just that maybe, for example, he heard it from a youngster. So, for example, people will be like, are you taking from young people, for example, so you don't mention it. Or, for example, let's put it this way. In today's world, you've got the likes of Hamza Yusuf. That you speak a person of the sort. So he's a misguided person, uttered many kufr things of the sort. Now, maybe at one point in time you heard from him and he was quoting a hadith from Bukhari, for example. Now, maybe he gave a sharh of a hadith, but now you don't want to say, I heard this from Hamza Yusuf. Okay, it wouldn't apply in hadith because if he was a kafir, we wouldn't have been taking his narrations in any case. So the point being that, you don't want to mention his name, but you want to mention the thing itself. So it has reached me. So, for example, that's one of the types of tadlis. So, in any case, so he says those are imma who would do tadlis, and yet his narrations are found in, for example, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Like he says, li'imamatihi, on account of the fact that he is such a great and senior imam in the deen, wa qillati tadlisihi, and the little amount of tadlis that he does. In other words, he's not somebody who every single time he opens his mouth, he's not telling you who he really heard it from and things of this sort. So it's like he's hiding, not one of those type of people. Qillatu tadlis. Now, Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in fact, did tadlis. So before you get the wrong idea and you jump and you think that, oh, you must be a wrong person if you're doing tadlis. No. It's like we speak today. We are mudallisin in the eyes of the muhaddithin because I narrate, for example, for example, Imam Bukhari said so. Imam Bukhari passed away over 1,000 years ago. There's so many people in my chain before it reaches Imam Bukhari. But I'm saying Imam Bukhari said so. I'm living generations upon generation. I'm living more than 1,000 years out. I'm a mudallis in that sense. Maybe it's just because I don't know my chain of narration for every hadith out of my head, but you get the picture. So, Sahaba radiallahu anhu would sometimes speak and they would say, like it's mentioned from someone from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Who's the someone? It was another Sahabi. So obviously, as-sahabatu kulluhum adul, all of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu are adil. They are of the highest level of thiqah. Jarh wa ta'adil, ends of tabi'in, it doesn't reach Sahaba because the Sahaba are above being looked at. Was he telling the truth? It don't apply to Sahaba at all. So Sahaba would mention without saying the name of who he got it from. So that concept, which became known as tadlis, was there all the time. So it wasn't something that was done with evil intentions. Later on, people started having evil intentions by doing such things, but originally that was not the case. So he says, because he does a little tadlis from the side of what he narrates, such as Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, ila akhirihi, until the end of the quotation. But nonetheless, he says Imam Sufyan al-Thawri had done tadlis, but it doesn't change the fact that he is one of the highest level of A'imma, and that is why you'll find his ahadith in Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Nasai, and Ibn Majah, and other places as well, all over the place. So he says, قلت فهذا الأثر منقطع والانقطاع غير مضر عندنا لا سيما إذا صدر عن الإمام كالثوري والموقوفات في مثل هذا مما لا يدرك بالرأي كالمرفوعات كما عرف في موضعه. So, okay. Zafar Ahmed,
now I can.
Maulana Zafar Ahmed Thanvi rahimahullah, he now comments, he says, فهذا الأثر, this narration. Now, al-hadith wal-athar, not to spend too much time on this point over here, is there a difference between a hadith, a khabar, a athar, and things of the sort? For some muhaddithin there is, for some others they use it as synonyms. But some imam they make a distinction. So they would use the term athar for the statements that come from Sahaba radiallahu anhu and is restricted as being their statement. And they would call it a hadith when it is from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Even though technically the Quran is hadith, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is hadith, the sayings of Sahaba are hadith. My speech to you right now, uhaddithukum. أحدثكم حديثا, I am speaking to you speech. So my speech is also hadith. But in the context of Shari'i terminology, we try and keep hadith for the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and we use athar for the words of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and so on and so forth. Even though the Kitabul Athar, for example, Kitabul Athar from Imam Abu Hanifa, Kitabul Athar of Imam Abu Yusuf, Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, rahimahumullah, and others, Athar is also used for ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So nonetheless, but here he's saying فَهَذَا الْأَثَرِ, he's using it in the modern thing to make a distinction between words of Sahaba and words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he says this statement of Hadrat Anas radiyallahu anhu, it is munqati'. Munqati' means the chain of narration is cut because there's people missing in the chain. He says well inqita', and a chain of narration where there's somebody missing like this, غَيْرُ مُضِرٍ عِنْدَنَا. According to Hanafi usul al-hadith, a munqati' chain is not a problem as far as we are concerned. Obviously, in the correct situation, don't mean that now I leave out the whole chain of narration and I make up something here and I narrate from a Sahabi. That wouldn't be accepted. But in certain situations where within the parameters that laid down by the fuqaha, there it is fine. So we say, la siyama. Moreover, إذا صدر عن الإمام كالثوري. Moreover, this is the case when it comes from the likes of an imam like Imam Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah. So he says, wal mawqufat, and a mawquf narration, meaning a mawquf. What mawquf? Hazrat Anas radiyallahu anhu was saying this. And that's why I said when I began that it's not something that he pulls from his pocket. Hence why he places this principle here, which we have done before, but he puts it down once again. في مثل هذا مما لا يدرك بالرأي كالمرفوعات كما عرف في موضعه. He says, when you have a statement from a Sahabi, which is the Sahabi speaking as if it is his words, but it's not something that you can reach this conclusion through personal opinion, then it is understood that this was actually from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though it's not explicitly stated as such. So, for example, if the Sahabi tells you amongst the signs of Qiyamah is that time will move faster, for example, how does he know this? He's speaking as if it's his words. How does a Sahabi know that this is from the signs of Qiyamah? He don't know the unseen. So it tells you he heard this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, despite the fact that he's not saying he heard this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for Hazrat Anas radiyallahu anhu to come along and say that the minimum hayd is 3 days, it necessitates that he heard this from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's not because why 3 days? Why not 1 day or 2 days or 10 days or 20 days? Why 3? Where do you get with the singling out of a specific time? And that is what the whole crux of the matter is about. But in any case, so that's what the whole crux of the matter is about, that when a Sahabi makes a statement which is not possible bil-ra'i, and that's why he puts this criteria here, something that is not based from ijtihad, therefore, in such a situation, this narration will be deemed as if it came from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says, كما عرف في موضعه, like you will have known from the place where it's stated, like I said, we've discussed this previously, and you can find this in the books of Mustalah al-Hadith, but nonetheless, that's what he's simply stating. So he's saying, despite the fact that, so in essence, what have we learned here tonight? Besides all the back and forth and extra things I've added in, which didn't belong inside here, but we established that if 10 days go by, then it is istihada. So maximum is 10 days. And here Hazrat Anas radiallahu anhu saying minimum is 3 days. And Hazrat Anas radiallahu anhu could not have come to this conclusion from his own ijtihad. Like I just thought up 3 days, because if he thought up 3 days, the next person may think up 7 days, next one may think up 2 days. So it's not something that he thought up. It's something he heard actually from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, on account of that fact alone, you have this essentially in essence from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say that the minimum is 3 days. Moving on further, we don't exactly have all that much time, but maybe we've got time. Let's see. Okay, mess of hadith. We definitely won't finish it. But okay, let's see anyway how far we go. So number 328 عن سفيان عن الجلد ابن أيوب عن معاوية ابن قرة عن أنس رضي الله عنه قال أدنى الحيض ثلاثة وأقصاه 10. قال وكيع في روايته الحيض 3 إلى 10 فما زاد فهي مستحاضة. أخرجه الدارقطني ورجاله ثقات غير جلد ابن أيوب فضعفه الناس وروى عنه الأئمة أئمة سفيان الثوري والحمادان وجرير بن حازم وعبد الوهاب الثقفي. وقال أبو عاصم لم يكن بذاك ولكن أصحابنا أسهلوا فيه. وقال إبراهيم الحربي غيره أثبت منه. وقال أبو حاتم شيخ أعرابي ضعيف الحديث يكتب حديثه ولا يحتج به ملخصا من الإسلام. Okay, so anyway, let's start part for part before our time runs out. Imam Sufyan narrates from Al-Jalad ibn Muawiyah ibn Qurra from Hazrat Anas radiyallahu anhu, who said that the minimum hayd is 3 days, and the maximum is 10. قال وكيع is Imam Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, the famous one. شكوت إلى وكيع of Imam الشافعي رحمه الله, the poem of his سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وأخبرني بأن العلم نور ونور الله لا يعطى لعاصي. That famous poem, people made it into a nasheed and everything of the sort. That is that same Imam Waki' ibn al-Jarrah. So Imam Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, in his narration, he says from Hadr Anas radiyallahu anhu that hayd is 3 days to إلى 10, from 3 to 10. In other words, minimum 3, maximum 10. فما زاد فهي مستحاضة. And whatever goes beyond this point, then it is istihada. So 10 days is the maximum. أخرجه الدارقطني. Imam الدارقطني رحمه الله is the narrator of this hadith. ورجاله ثقات. And then the narrators of the chain are ثقة, except for Jalad ibn Ayyub. So in other words, the whole chain is okay except for one person, and that person is Jalad ibn Ayyub. فضعفه الناس. مجرد من المحدثين graded him as being weak. وروى عنه الأئمة, and certain أئمة narrated from him, such as Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam al-Hamadan, Imam Jarir ibn Hazim, Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Thaqafi. So they narrated from him. So Imam Abu Asim, he says, Lam yakun bidhak. Jalal ibn Ayyub, he wasn't really a strong narrator. He wasn't a liar. But in other words, meaning that, he's like, he had a weak memory, as we would say. He's not the evil, lying roundabout type person making things up. It's just that he made mistakes because his memory was not up to scratch, that kind of thing. So ولكن أصحابنا أسهلوا فيه. But he says he wasn't so authentic and great. He made mistakes, but our companions were lenient with regards to him. In other words, they deemed him to be a truthful person, even though he made mistakes, so they accepted from him. وقال إبراهيم الحربي, Imam Ibrahim al-Harbi says غيره أثبت منه. There are other people, those meaning like his contemporaries, they are more, ثقة ثبت is a terminology muhaddithin often use to grade somebody as being reliable and on point. So he says the others are more on point than him. In other words, yeah, he's not the greatest. He makes mistakes. He may put, say, an instrument of digging, whereas in reality, a spade was said. So, others say it was a spade, it was a spade, it was a spade, and he comes on, it was actually an instrument of digging. So, as far as authenticity is concerned, why are you talking about the instrument of digging when a spade is actually what the rest of the contemporaries, or not contemporaries, but your other colleagues who heard the hadith together with you, they're saying all spade and you come with the instrument of digging. So muhaddithin paid very much attention to, as accurately that you relay the hadith as possible. So therefore he says, غيره أثبت منه. There are others who are more on point than him. So he's not saying he's rejected. He's just saying that fine, we'll take from him, but the others are more authentic than him, in other words. وقال أبو حاتم شيخ أعرابي ضعيف الحديث. So Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, he says that Jalad ibn Ayyub, he is a Bedouin sheikh who is weak in hadith. يكتب حديث ولا يحتج به. His hadith are written down but not used as proof. In other words, it's a light form of jarh. Jarh, and the opposite is ta'dil. So they're finding slight fault with him to say that, his narrations are not the best. You can write it down. If he was a liar, his narrations would not even be written. He'd be kicked out entirely. So he says, يكتب حديث ولا يحتج به. That you write his hadith, but he's not used as freestanding dalil in simple terms because he does make mistakes, that sort of thing. This is mulakhasan min al-lisan. It's this is like a summary what is found in lisan. What is lisan? Lisanul mizan. That's the name of the kitab, not an abbreviated form from your tongue. Al-lisan is always referred to lisanul mizan. قلت وللحديث شواهد بطرق متعددة ذكرها المحقق في الفتح. ثم قال فهذه عدة أحاديث متعددة الطرق وذلك يرفع الضعيف إلى الحسن إلى آخره. قلت وقد رواه سفيان عن أنس رضي الله عنه أيضا بلاغا كما مر عن الدارمي وهذا يدل على صحة الأثر عنده عن أنس رضي الله عنه وإلا لم يجزم بنسبته إليه. Okay, so he says, to summarize before time runs out, he says, Maulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi says, this narration, fine, we'll admit that Jalal ibn Ayyub is not the best of narrators because he has some weakness in him. Fine, that's in its place. But he says, the narration has got shawahid, it's got supporting evidences, بطرق متعددة, through numerous different chains. ذكرها المحقق في الفتح, it's mentioned by the محقق obviously in al-Fath. But he says ثم قال, and then he mentions therein فهذه عدة أحاديث. So these are a number of ahadith متعددة الطرق. They have many chains of narration. وذلك يرفع الضعيف إلى الحسن. And this, having multiple chains of narration, it takes a chain which is weak and it raises it to being Hasan. This is a standard principle of hadith, that when a narration is weak and it's got supporting evidence, then it gets raised to the level of being Hasan. And Hasan, as you know, is a terminology to say it's suitable for use as dalil, yuhtajju bihi, so to speak, all those kind of things, you can make use of a Hassan hadith in such a situation. So despite the fact that we have a weak narrator such as Jalad ibn Ayyub in the chain, because of the supporting evidences, this one is also deemed as being reliable and authentic. So it is ila akhrihi, and end quote, that's what this alif and hamza stands for. So Imran al-Zafar now he says, and besides, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri narrated from Anas radiallahu anhu, balaghan, like balaghani, that it has reached me. So كما مر عن الدارمي, like how it has been mentioned previously in the previous hadith from Imam al-Darimi rahimahullah. So he says وهذا يدل, and this points out على صحة الأثر عنده, and this shows that the fact that Imam Sufyan al-Thawri deemed the narration to be authentic according to him, meaning he deemed it authentic with the likes of Imam Jalad ibn Ayyub in the chain. Hence why he says, otherwise, if he did not deem it to be authentic, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri would not have made a claim to say Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu said this, because he would then have said, it has reached me, so and so claimed this, and there's some problem with it, for example. But he didn't do such a thing. He said, it reached me that Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu said this, meaning that I have conviction in my heart that Hadrat Anas radiallahu anhu said this, because I deem this chain to be suitable and authentic enough to establish this. That's basically what this is saying in a nutshell. So he says, for this reason, it's an extra additional proof to raise this level to the level of being Hassan. So we have established thus in this class that the minimum hayd is 3 days, the maximum hayd is 10 days. Like I say, other Aimma will have their dalil, but if you are a Hanafi and you come in a conversation and you want to know what is our dalil, and I must point out one thing over here before we end on the last note. This is not the dalil used by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, because obviously Imam Darimi, Imam Daraqutni, all of these ones lived long after Imam Abu Hanifa. So Imam Abu Hanifa didn't come back to life and then go and take the books of these Aimma and say, okay, I reported from Imam Bukhari. No, Imam Abu Hanifa reported it with his own chain as a tabi'i to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Thus, he did not need Imam Sufyan al-Thawri or anyone else, because like I said, he was elder, he was senior to Imam Sufyan al-Thawri in the first place. So nonetheless, at the end of the day, the point being that this is dalil used by the Ahnaf, but it's not the dalil that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah himself had used. So even if there was a weakness in the dalil we give, it doesn't change the authenticity of the dalil given by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, because he was the closest of the close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. Therefore, the fact that he deemed it as being reliable, that alone is more than sufficient. But that being said, we end on this point.